The discovery it was a quiet Saturday morning, and Mark had just finished his usual routine. He had grabbed his coffee, checked the news, and was now relaxing on the couch. The house was calm, a perfect moment of peace that he'd come to cherish, in the midst of a busy life. But today, something felt off. He wasn't sure what it was, but there was a tension in the air, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. His wife, Sarah, was out running errands, and their son, Ryan, was in his room. Ryan, Mark's stepson, was a quiet kid. He usually kept to himself, spending most of his time reading or playing video games. Mark had never really had any problems with him. He wasn't a troublemaker, and most of the time he was a good kid. But lately, Mark had noticed a few changes. Ryan had become distant, more secretive than usual. He'd lock himself in his room for hours, sometimes not even responding when Mark called out to him. At first, Mark brushed it off as typical teenage behavior. But today, something felt different. Mark tried to ignore the unease in his gut, but his curiosity got the better of him. He stood up from the couch and walked toward the hallway, heading toward Ryan's room. As he passed by the door, he noticed that it was slightly ajar. The sound of a low hum drifted from within, faint but noticeable. It wasn't the sound of the TV or a game, but something else, something that seemed ... out of place. Mark stopped. In his tracks, his heart rate picking up. He was used to Ryan being absorbed in his own world, but this felt like an invitation to something more, something he wasn't supposed to see. Mark hesitated for a moment. He wasn't the type to invade Ryan's privacy, but today his gut told him something was wrong. He carefully pushed the door open, just enough to peek inside. What he saw made his heart skip a beat. Ryan was sitting at his desk, hunched over something with intense focus. The soft hum he had heard was coming from a small, mysterious device that Mark hadn't seen before. It was metallic, sleek, and glowing faintly with blue light. Ryan had his hands on it, pressing buttons and moving his fingers in precise movements. Mark could barely make out the details of the device from where he stood, but it was unlike anything he had seen in the house before. For a moment, Mark just stood there, frozen in place. He had always trusted Ryan. He had never given him a reason to doubt his intentions. But now, seeing this strange device in his hands, something inside Mark stirred. What was Ryan doing with something like that? Mark had never seen his son show interest in anything beyond his games or schoolwork. This was different. This was secretive, deliberate. Ryan's back was turned to him, and he didn't notice Mark standing in the doorway. Mark felt a strange sense of guilt wash over him, but his curiosity overpowered it. Slowly, he stepped into the room, the floor creaking softly under his weight. Ryan stiffened when he heard the sound of Mark's footsteps, quickly spinning around in his chair. His eyes widened with surprise, and for a brief moment, Mark thought he saw a flicker of fear across his face, but it was gone as quickly as it had come, replaced by a nervous smile. "Dad," Ryan said, his voice a little too high-pitched. "What are you doing here?" Mark raised an eyebrow, still processing what he had just witnessed. "I could ask you the same thing. What is that thing?" Ryan quickly pushed the device to the side as if trying to hide it. "It's nothing. Just a project for school. I'm messing around with it for a science project," he explained. His words rushed. Mark wasn't convinced. The way Ryan was acting, the nervous energy radiating off of him, told a different story. "A science project?" Mark repeated, his voice calm but steady. "Since when do you work on projects like that?" Ryan hesitated, his fingers nervously tapping the edge of the desk. "I've been looking into some stuff ... online. It's just some tech stuff, nothing serious." Mark took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice level. "Ryan, you can talk to me. Whatever it is, you don't have to hide it from me." But Ryan's face reddened slightly, and he quickly shook his head. I'm fine, Dad. It's nothing. I just wanted to see how it worked. It's just a device. I didn't think it would bother you. Mark stood there, staring at his stepson for a moment, trying to decide what to do. Ryan seemed so insistent, but something in Mark's gut told him that wasn't the full truth. There was more to the device, more to what Ryan had been hiding. Mark wasn't sure if he should push further or let it go. He knew it was important to give Ryan space, but this was different. He needed to know what his son was up to. The unease Mark had felt earlier had only intensified, and he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something bigger at play. Here, Ryan, Mark began carefully, I'm not mad. But I need you to be honest with me. What's going on with that thing? Ryan looked down, his fingers twirling nervously around a pencil. I can't tell you everything right now. It's just something I've been working on in my free time. Mark's patience was wearing thin. He stepped forward, closer to his son, but tried to keep his voice calm. Ryan, this isn't just a school project, is it? What's really going on? Ryan swallowed hard, his eyes darting nervously. I promise it's nothing bad. I'm just experimenting with some tech I found online, but it's not what you think. Mark felt his anxiety rising. This wasn't just a harmless project. There was something strange going on, and it had to do with the device. He had to know more, but Ryan wasn't ready to open up, not yet. And in that moment, Mark realized he would need to dig deeper to uncover the truth. The hidden truth Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As he stood in Ryan's room, watching his stepson avoid his gaze, it became clear that there was more to the situation than Ryan was willing to admit. The strange device, the secrecy, and Ryan's sudden defensiveness, it all pointed to something deeper, something Mark wasn't prepared for. Ryan, sensing the change in Mark's demeanor, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His nervous movements didn't escape Mark's attention. Mark knew Ryan well enough to recognize when something wasn't right. The questions were piling up in his mind, but he wasn't sure if pushing too hard would just drive Ryan further. Away, Ryan, listen, Mark said, his tone softer now, trying to bridge the gap between them. I get that you're trying to keep things private, but when you start hiding stuff like this, it worries me. I care about you, and if something's wrong, you can always talk to me. Ryan looked away, his eyes focused on the floor. The silence in the room felt heavy, and Mark knew that the longer he waited, the more difficult it would be to get the truth. Finally, Ryan spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. It's not what you think, okay? I didn't mean to keep it a secret from you. He stopped himself, as though unsure whether to continue. Mark could tell there was something he was holding back. Something important. Mark didn't want to pressure him too much, but he needed answers. What's going on, Ryan? You know you can trust me. I won't judge you. Ryan hesitated, his eyes flicking nervously toward the strange device. I found it online, he muttered, somewhere on the dark web. It's technology that shouldn't even exist, but it does. And I thought it might help. I thought it could fix ... things. Mark was taken aback. The dark web? What are you talking about, Ryan? Ryan looked up at him, his face a mixture of guilt and fear. I've been messing around with it. It's a device that can manipulate signals. It's not just tech, it's connected to something bigger. It can alter things, control systems, and maybe even people. I don't know if it's real or just a scam, but I thought if it worked, I could use it to make things better, make people see things differently, make them understand. Mark's jaw clenched. Ryan, this isn't just some project. This is dangerous. The dark web is full of things that could get you into real trouble. You can't play with stuff like that. Do you have any idea what you're messing with? Ryan's eyes were wide now, his voice desperate. I thought I could control it, Dad. I thought I could just fix everything, you know? But now, now, I'm scared. It's starting to do things on its own. The device, it's not responding the way it should. I think it's alive, Mark. It's like it has its own mind. Mark felt a chill run down his spine. The way Ryan described the device, it didn't sound like a simple gadget. It sounded like something far more sinister, something with its own purpose. What do you mean by alive? Are you telling me the device is controlling itself now? Ryan nodded, his face pale. Yeah, I don't know how, but the more I mess with it, the more it reacts. I think it's been programmed to do something. Something terrible. Mark's mind raced. What is it supposed to do, Ryan? What's its purpose? Ryan took a deep breath. I think it's meant to control people. Not just signals or machines, but people. I don't know how, but I think it's a weapon. I shouldn't have messed with it, but now it's too late. Mark took a step back, his head spinning. This wasn't just a teenage mistake, it was something much worse. Ryan had gotten tangled in something far darker than he had realized. The device was connected to an unknown network, something dangerous, and now it was threatening to spiral out of control. Listen to me, Ryan, Mark said, his voice steady but filled with concern. We need to get rid of that device. It's not something we can play with. I don't care what it's supposed to do or what you thought. It's too dangerous. You've got to let me help you fix this. Ryan looked down at the device, his fingers twitching as if he was considering turning it back on. I can't just get rid of it, Mark. I've already used it. It's too powerful. What if I can make it work for me? What if I can use it to fix things, to change things? Mark grabbed Ryan's shoulders, gently but firmly. No, you're not using that thing again. You don't know what you're dealing with. It's beyond your control now. We need to get help, real help. This isn't something you can fix on your own. Ryan's eyes welled up with tears. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just wanted to make things better. I never thought it would get this far. Mark's heart ached for him. He knew Ryan wasn't a bad kid. He had just made a mistake, a huge one. But now, the consequences were unfolding before them, and Mark wasn't sure if they could stop it. Ryan, you're not alone in this. We'll fix this, but we need to do it the right way. No more secrets. No more playing with things you don't understand. We're going to get this under control together. But you have to trust me, okay? Ryan nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face. Okay, I trust you. Mark took a deep breath and glanced at the device once more. There was no turning back. They had to stop it now before it did any more damage. Asterisk the rising danger mark stood. In the middle of Ryan's room, the weight of the situation heavy in the air. The device, now sitting silently on the desk, had grown from a simple curiosity into something far more sinister. What had started as an innocent mistake by Ryan now felt like a ticking time bomb. Mark's mind raced with possibilities, each darker than the last. Ryan was sitting on the edge of his bed, his face pale, his body tense. The tears had dried, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. Mark could tell that his stepson was terrified, and he couldn't blame him. This wasn't just a device that Ryan had found on the dark web. It was something much more dangerous, something with a purpose far beyond what either of them had realized. Mark knew they couldn't waste any more time. They needed to neutralize the device before it could cause more damage. But as he stared at the small, glowing object on the desk, he realized the challenge wasn't going to be as simple as he had hoped. Ryan, Mark said, trying to keep his voice calm. You've got to listen to me. We can't let this thing out of here. We need to find a way to disable it, to make sure it can't hurt anyone else. Ryan nodded slowly, his face conflicted. But how do we do that? Every time I try to shut it down, it just comes back on. It won't stop, Mark. I don't know how much longer I can keep it under control. Mark's hands were shaking as he reached for the device. The urge to destroy it was almost overpowering, but he knew they had to handle it carefully. If they didn't, it could trigger something irreversible. He picked it up gingerly, feeling the strange hum of energy that seemed to pulse through it. For a brief moment, he thought he could almost hear a faint voice whispering from the device, like it was alive, waiting for its next command. "Let's take it to the workshop," Mark said, snapping out of his thoughts. "I have some tools there, and we'll try to open it up and see what's inside. Maybe we can find a way to disconnect it." Ryan stood up hesitantly, his eyes fixed on the device. "I don't know if that'll work, Dad. I've tried everything. Every time I think I've turned it off, it just powers back on." "It's like it has its own mind." Mark's gaze softened. He knew Ryan was scared. He had been in over his head, trying to control something that wasn't meant for anyone, let alone a teenager. But there was no turning back now. They had to take action. Together, they walked down the stairs into the workshop. Mark's heart beat faster with each step. The room, usually filled with the comforting sound of tools and machines, now felt like a place of dread. He didn't know what would happen next. The device had already shown signs of being far more advanced than anything he had ever encountered, and he wasn't sure if he could fix it, but he had no choice. Ryan sat down at the workbench, watching as Mark carefully placed the device in front of him. Mark had worked with all kinds of tech in his life, but this was different. It didn't look like anything he had ever seen before. The sleek metal exterior seemed to pulse with a low, unnatural glow, and the surface was covered in tiny, intricate symbols. Symbols that seemed alien. Mark connected the device to one of his computers, hoping to get a better idea of what he was dealing with. As he waited for the computer to process the data, he could feel Ryan's eyes on him, his presence a constant reminder of the danger they were in. Mark wanted to assure him that everything would be fine, but deep down, he wasn't so sure. Series of complex lines of code appeared on the screen. Mark skimmed the data, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The code was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Some parts were in familiar programming languages, but others ... Others were completely foreign. It was as if the device had been built using a mix of human technology and something else. Entirely ... Suddenly, the device hummed to life again, its light growing brighter. Mark froze. The computer screen flashed with new data this time. The code was different. The lines were moving, almost as if they were rewriting themselves. The device was responding to the system, and Mark had a sickening feeling that it wasn't just going to sit there passively. "Ryan, stay back," Mark said, his voice tight with urgency. "I think it's trying to connect to something. We need to shut it down now." Ryan's face turned pale again. "What's happening? What's it doing?" Before Mark could answer, the device gave a loud mechanical whir, and the computer screen flashed a warning. It was too late. The device had connected to something external, something far beyond their control. Mark's eyes widened as the screen showed a new set of coordinates scattered across the galaxy. "Oh, no," he muttered under his breath. The device wasn't just a piece of technology. It was a signal, a beacon. And it had just sent out a message. A message that Mark couldn't understand, but one that was certainly reaching someone or something. The hum from the device grew louder, more intense, as if it were calling out to the unknown. Mark's heart raced. He had just stumbled into something far bigger than he had ever imagined. "Ryan," Mark said, his voice shaking, "I think we've just activated something we can't stop. We need to figure out who or what this message is for, and fast. Whatever it is, it's coming." The incoming threat Mark stood frozen in front of the screen, his fingers still hovering over the keyboard. The device's glow was intensifying, its hum now a deep, resonant pulse that seemed to echo through the walls of the workshop. Ryan stood. Next to him, his face pale and his eyes wide with fear. The coordinates on the screen didn't make sense, and yet Mark couldn't tear his eyes away from them. They were scattered across distant stars in parts of the galaxy that Mark knew very little about. But what terrified him the most wasn't the unfamiliar locations. It was the feeling that the device was no longer just a tool. It had become a beacon, and something or someone had received its call. Double quotes Mark. What did we just do? Ryan's voice trembled, his words barely above a whisper. Mark's own voice caught in his throat as he turned toward the device, its lights now flickering rapidly. He had no answer for Ryan. In that moment, he realized that they had crossed the line. A line that couldn't be undone. Before Mark could respond, the humming sound from the device grew louder, almost deafening. A surge of energy coursed through the workshop, and Mark felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. The device was alive, reacting to the signal it had sent. And it wasn't just sitting there, it was waiting. The warning on the computer screen flashed again, this time with a new message. Signal received. Response inbound. Estimated arrival, 24 hours. Mark's heart sank. Response inbound? He repeated the words under his breath, trying to make sense of them. What did it mean? Who or what was responding? Ryan took a step back, his eyes scanning the room as if looking for some kind of escape. We need to get rid of it, Mark. Whatever we just activated, we can't handle it. We need to destroy that device now, before it gets worse. Mark ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. The ship, the device, the dark web, it was all starting to feel like a nightmare spiraling out of control. They weren't just dealing with a piece of tech anymore. They were dealing with something far more dangerous, something that had the potential to reach beyond their world. Ryan, I don't think we can destroy it, Mark said, his voice low with a mixture of regret and fear. It's already too late. The message is out there, and whoever is on the other side, whatever is on the other side, it's already coming. We need to prepare for whatever's about to happen. Ryan swallowed hard. But how do we prepare for something like that? We don't even know who or what it is. Mark walked over to the device, still glowing ominously on the desk. He could feel the weight of its presence, like it was watching him, waiting for him to make the next move. His fingers hovered over the device, and for a split second, he considered smashing it to pieces, destroying it, ending whatever madness it had unleashed. But deep down, he knew it was far too powerful for that. It wasn't just a piece of alien tech, it was connected to something larger, something more dangerous. Before Mark could make a decision, the room shook. The sound of low, mechanical rumbling filled the air, and the lights above flickered. Mark quickly turned toward the window, expecting to see something, anything that could explain the tremors. But the sky was still. The air was still. It was as if the world itself had frozen in place. Then it came. A faint, low hum of frequency that Mark could feel deep in his chest. It wasn't coming from the device, but from somewhere outside the workshop. His eyes widened as he turned back toward Ryan. Did you hear that? Mark asked, his voice tight. Ryan nodded, his face filled with fear. What is that? What's happening? The hum grew louder, the vibrations more intense. It wasn't just an ordinary sound. It was a signal, a response to the device's call. And whatever was responding, it was getting closer. Mark quickly ran to the computer and pulled up the coordinates once more. They hadn't changed, but as he scrolled over them, his hand stopped suddenly. There, hidden within the string of stars, was one location that made his stomach drop, an enormous cluster of ships, unlike anything he had ever seen. The design was sleek, dark, almost otherworldly, and Mark could tell instantly that they were. Massive, far too large to be ordinary spacecraft. Ryan walked over, looking at the screen. What are those? They look different. Mark didn't answer at first. His eyes were locked onto the ships. His heart raced and his mind struggled to process the implications. The ships were not just any kind of alien fleet. They were warships prepared for battle, and they were headed straight toward Earth. Mark's mind raced with the terrifying possibilities. Whoever had received the signal, whoever had been waiting for the device's activation, had heard it loud and clear. They were coming, and they were bringing an army. Ryan, Mark said, his voice filled with urgency, we need to prepare. They're coming, and we need to figure out what to do before it's too late. Ryan's face went pale, his body frozen in place. What are we supposed to do, Mark? We can't fight an alien fleet. How do we even stop them? Mark stared at the screen, watching the ships draw nearer, as if they were being pulled in by the device itself. There was no clear way to fight. No way to prepare for the scale of the threat that was approaching. They were too far out of their depth, but Mark wasn't the type to give up. If this was what he and Ryan were facing, then they needed to act. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. We don't stop them, Mark said, his voice low and determined. We find out what they want. We figure out what they're really after, and we use that against them. We've got 24 hours, Ryan. That's all we have. Ryan looked at his stepfather, his fear slowly replaced by a flicker of resolve. 24 hours, got it. As Mark looked back at the screen, the incoming fleet continued to approach. It wasn't just a simple alien encounter anymore. It was the beginning of something bigger, something that could change everything. And as the hum of the alien fleet grew louder, Mark knew one thing for sure. They weren't just preparing for a fight. We're preparing for the unknown.